violence campaign manager. And gun violence campaign manager located in Chicago. Stated was organized with the organization, worked my way through the organizing team, and now on the campaign side and running our gun violence campaign. As you may have know, it was set in our last, and we're currently still working on strategic plan as a priority campaign, and will be dealt with in the upcoming strategic plan activities that will take place at this upcoming AGM. So we will hopefully be continuing our gun violence work as the next strategic plan is adopted as well. And so yeah, I want to jump in. Please, if you got questions, please ask away. I don't know if I will take the full 20-30 minutes, but I will try my best with what we got to talk about. And so the gun violence campaign, many folks will ask, as we started to get into the work, why is Amnesty doing a gun violence work? Why is a human rights organization doing gun violence? And honestly, that was coming from outside as well as inside the organization of why are we doing gun violence work? And so, my answer would always be, human rights, the biggest human right that we fight for as an organization is the right to life. And if an individual is not living, all the other rights go away. The right to health, the right to education, the right to travel, to move around, all of that is null and void if you're not alive. And so gun violence around the world, and then especially here in the United States, has become a crisis that we have to address. And we can't just leave it up to our partners and friends that are doing gun violence work, but the largest human rights organization should also take a stab at trying to get a handle of this gun violence across the globe. And so we dived into it in a more strategic way. We've always worked on gun violence, and maybe not in the title of gun violence previously, when we looked at child soldiers and talked about and dealt with child soldiers, when we looked at the Arms Trade Treaty, when we looked at the transformation or the transportation of guns across lines and that type of thing. All of that was gun violence work. But, we came with the title per se, or the box to put it in, of gun violence. And so we launched our campaign in 2017 here in the US. But around the world, I'm going to hit some global pieces first before coming back home to the domestic piece. Around the world, the last reports that we have is like 500 people die from gun violence every day across the globe. Sorry about that, let me get this. So I'll keep getting emails and making noise. So it's 500 people die across the globe from gun violence every day. Here in the US, we're estimating about 100 to 109 people die every day from gun violence here in the US. So we're a fifth of that violence that takes place every day. It's about 2,000 individuals that are injured by gun violence every day. That's individuals that are shot, that don't die, they make it to the hospital. It was non-life threatening violence that takes place. And here in America, we have about 360 of those roughly every day. So again, a huge number of the world gun violence takes place right here in the US. And I want to say this as well as I start. Amnesty is not against the Second Amendment. And so if individuals, if you start talking to folks about gun violence, especially being in Texas, and Texas, as well as a lot of our other southern states, love the guns. But we're not against the Second Amendment. Amnesty is not petitioning and working to reverse the Second Amendment. It's the law of the land. And as you know, Amnesty works with the law of the land, no matter where it is. But we see that if there's going to be a Second Amendment, if guns are going to be allowed, then there should be common sense legislation that's in place to regulate the guns that's there. If you have to get a sticker and register your car every year, you have to go get a sticker, register your car every year. Then when you purchase a firearm, you should also have to register that firearm. And that's just one time. When you purchase it, you register it, you get your license, and you go about your business. The car you have to do every year. No one complains about that. on the masses. No one complains about that 50, 100, $125, whatever it costs to register your car every year. So why is there an issue to register a firearm that could kill an individual, that we don't know who has it, where it is, as well? And so gun violence, most definitely has to be dealt with. And so gun violence, in the definition of gun violence, is is the activity of anyone getting harmed by a firearm. And so gun violence can be in the form of violence in communities that happen every day, from suicide, domestic violence, and then as well, some forms of police use of force falls under gun violence as well. And so the use of a firearm in any of those situations are categorized as gun violence. Mhm. Uh, but going back globally, like I said, 500 people every day. Um, the 2,000 that are injured but do not, that may not have life threatening injuries as well every day. So Amnesty has continued to work worldwide around gun violence, and the biggest piece, most recently, has been the Arms Trade Treaty. So the Arms Trade Treaty, as many of you probably worked on, as well as the local group work, that will help regulate the transportation of arms across countries and to where they can be sold, and making sure that they're not given to or sold to individuals that are using guns in the wrong way against their people. And so 2014, the Arms Trade Treaty was adopted by the UN, and many countries signed off and ratified the Arms Trade Treaty. The US did sign it, but did not ratify it. The Senate did not ratify the Arms Trade Treaty, and we are not currently abiding by or being held liable, or holding ourselves liable for the arms and guns that we trade, that could possibly be traded from the US. And so part of our 2022, yeah, we're in 2022 work will be back on the Arms Trade Treaty. We feel that we do have a good administration, and we are a nonpartisan organization. We have to say that. We are nonpartisan, but we do feel we have a good administration, that we could possibly get the Senate and this president to re-sign and ratify the Arms Trade Treaty, so that we will, in our practice of trading arms, who we're selling it to, how we sell it, will be regulated by this Arms Trade Treaty, so we can make sure that guns that are transported out of the U.S. are regulated in some form or fashion. There's currently a lawsuit, you may have seen a lawsuit out of the country of Mexico, against the U.S. in regards to the arms and guns, firearms that have been sold and transported to the country of Mexico to help, that has led to the atrocities around gun violence in their country. And so we have countries now suing the U.S. for the work that they have done, or the lack of work that they have done in helping to regulate the guns that are flowing across country lines as well. And so we're looking for the 2022 plan to really ramp up again some of our Arms Trade Treaty work, and we'll most definitely get that information out as that starts to flow as well. Also, and so that's been our global piece around the world. Brazil, Kenya, other countries, amnesty sections in those countries, Mexico, Jamaica, Australia has also been tackling gun violence work in their countries specifically as well. We are hopefully, during the AGM, we'll have some of those on our panel. We are, just my plug for our panel at the AGM. We will hopefully have some of our colleagues from Kenya specifically, as well as Brazil, on the panel. I'm trying to identify another one, to be on the panel to talk about the similarities of gun violence in those countries, and USA as well. And so they have been working on gun violence in their specific country, just as much as we have. And there's a lot of similarities in the gun violence, from the suicide rates, which have been growing over the past couple of years, especially since COVID has taken over the globe, and looking at domestic violence and the violence against women as well, and the use of, of firearms in those acts of violence also. And so gun violence crosses a lot of barriers. It crosses a lot of lines. It's not a one track situation in gun violence. And so we as Amnesty, as well as other organizations, decide their path and how they're going to attack this gun violence situation. And so we have did our international piece around the arms trade treaty, and then domestically as well. And so domestically, we started 2017. We started 2017 with our report. We launched our report. We started research on our report here domestically called In the Line of Fire, that you'll be able to find on the website. But In the Line of Fire, and that report looked at gun violence in totality, as I stated earlier: suicide, community violence, domestic violence, police use of force, and looked at Chicago, New Orleans, and the Oakland Bay area for that research, and talked to organizations, survivors of gun violence, police, elected officials, churches, etc., to talk about and understand what gun violence looks like. As you know, Amnesty, in our thorough reporting and research. And so that was released in the fall of 2018. And then subsequently, we've had three subsequent reports to come out. One on survivors of gun violence and the challenges that survivors have in rebuilding their lives after that situation, and the funding that's there for those individuals. In every state, they have a crimes victim fund, some form of a crimes victim fund. And it's not just for gun violence, but any crime. But the barriers and the challenges that's there in order for individuals to receive those dollars hinders a lot of individuals from receiving, especially gun violence victims as well. So then we did our third report was on domestic violence, and we looked at Baton Rouge, and worked with a couple of organizations in Baton Rouge to produce that report around ERPO laws, looking at domestic violence, ERPO, ERPO, emergency restraining protective orders, laws that are in place to protect individuals in a domestic situation. And then our third report, or fourth report in the series, was around community-based organizations and the work that community organizations are doing to curb gun violence in cities across the country. And that came out last year as well. And all of the reports on the stage you can find on the Amnesty USA website. So we launched those reports, and from there, we've been doing a lot of legislative work, as well as working with coalition and other organizations on the ground. And our legislation work has been from the federal, state, and local level in regards to looking at background check legislation. Looking at currently, it's a safe storage bill titled Ethan's Law, that's currently moving in the US Congress, that hopefully we can get passed this session, that will look at how require individuals that have guns to have them secured. If you know Ethan's story, young man, I think he was 13, I believe he was, went to his friend's house. His friend's dad has a pistol and had been showing them how to shoot the gun previously. So the gun was not locked up. They got hold of the gun, not knowing that a round can be in the chamber of the gun, of an automatic gun. They playing with it, thought it was empty, thought they had took everything out. His friend accidentally shot it and killed him. And so his parents have been on the mission of getting Ethan's Law, a safe storage law, passed in the Congress as well. And so we've been working on those type of pieces of legislation. Permitless carry most definitely has been a piece in states across the country. And I believe Texas is a permitless carry state. And so states across the country, especially when it's been interesting, the uptick in gun sales during COVID, as well as the push for these permitless carry and the relaxation of gun laws that have taken place over the last 2 years per se, that we've been in this COVID life situation. And so we've worked on the local level, in states around those type of things, guns on campus. A lot of states after the campus shooting, I believe it was in Virginia, a lot of states began to introduce legislation to allow guns on campus, and for students to be able to carry weapons on campus, as well. And we all know the mix of a 20-year-old and everything else that already go on campus, for them to be able to have a loaded weapon, as well on the school campus is a mix for some possible dangerous stuff. And so we've also been, in some of our coalitions pushing to end or not allow those pieces of legislation to pass, as well. But they have. In Ohio, has passed, and I believe it's Kansas. It has passed. Was currently one in Florida now that we're trying to work to stop some campus carry legislation also across the board. And so we've done a lot of those pieces of legislation over the last 2 years. I came on board as the manager of the campaign in 20 end of 2019. And so we started looking at community-based violence, and violence in Black and Brown communities specifically, as Black men are 18 to 34 are the number one victims of gun violence in the country. The same age group is Hispanic. Our Latino community as well is the next leading group of individuals in that age range to be affected by gun violence. So we wanted to look at how we can work with organizations in those communities that has the issue of gun violence. The organizations there that's doing great work that many of us never hear about. They don't get the funding that's needed, that they need to do the work that they're doing. So we dived into the community-based violence lane over the last 2 years, and started working on how do we get funding for those organizations. And Senator Booker, Cory Booker out of
New Jersey.
There we go. Thank you. Senator Cory Booker out of Jersey and Representative Horsford out of Nevada, both introduced a piece of legislation titled Break the Cycle of Violence Act. And they introduced it in last session. And so that legislation would provide funding for community-based organizations, as well as create an Office of Gun Violence Prevention on a federal level, as well as require some roadmap of how we will address gun violence in the US. And so as we know, last legislative session, we did not have a friendly Congress, we did not have a friendly administration, and so it did not move. But as we came into this session, this new session, Senator Booker, Representative Horsford reintroduced the legislation. And so we began to campaign and work on that legislation again, and started having conversations with the administration, and actually was told that the dollar amount that was in the legislation wasn't enough, and that we need to go back and help rewrite and get additional dollars. And so that happened. We came up with a dollar amount of $5 billion over 8 years. That will be provided to community-based organizations doing the work. And so the President Biden and his administration heard the conversation, and agreed. And so he, as you may have saw back in last April, I believe it was, in his speech in the Rose Garden, he stated that he wanted to see $5 billion in his American Jobs Plan, which ended up being the Build Back Better Act. And so in the Build Back Better Act, there is the $5 billion written in the Build Back Better Act for community-based organizations doing gun violence prevention work. And so we have been since then working to get that passed. It's been passed through the House. We are now in the Senate. And as we all know, it has been stalled by Senator Manchin out of West Virginia, the one smallest state in everywhere of nothingness. He has stopped the whole process of the Build Back Better Act. And as you know, the Build Back Better not only has the dollars for gun violence work, but it also has the climate change money in it. It has environmental money and it has the child care money in it. It's a lot of money there, but it has all been stalled. And so we're still working, doing lobbying and having conversations to see how we can get that passed before the session is over. And we, who knows how, as we were talking earlier, how the election cycle is going to be come November. So we're trying to push and get this done before the end of this legislative session, this 117th session. And so we launched, in that process, we launched a project called the Heroes Project. And the Heroes Project identified 7 individuals in 6 states that we could elevate their story. And so we work with identify these individuals that are doing grassroots community-based work on gun violence in their communities. And we did, a nice marketing piece. We did pictures with them. We mocked up their pictures and the superhero-ish look. And we did, some advertising, marketing, some posters in DC. We did conversations virtually with them, with some of the legislators. If you attended AGM in the past couple of years, you may have saw them on the panel having a conversation on what their work is on a day-to-day basis. No matter COVID was going on, they still were getting called out to hospitals to help intervene in between situations that's taking place. They became the voice of COVID and giving people information on what COVID is and how they need to get a mask and where to find vaccines, etc. And so our Heroes Project has helped not only for us to push for the legislation, but we've been able to highlight and give these individuals the opportunity to be the hero and be recognized as the heroes that they are in their community. And so we had that launch last year. Hopefully this year we'll be continuing to do some work with them around that. So real quick, I think I hit my 20 minutes, but real quickly for the plan for the campaign for this year, we're looking at for 2022 on the global scene is working on our arms trade treaty. My colleague Jasmeet and the MSP co-group is going to be working to develop what those actions will look like and what we are going to be needing members to do in regards to joining in and doing some push and fight for the ratification of the arms trade treaty this year. Then secondly, we'll be still doing our federal piece around Build Back Better Act. And if we have to go back to break the cycle of violence act, if Build Back Better doesn't pass, then we will do that, but continue to put pressure on the federal government to create some avenues of funding for these organizations that's doing this work that many times are not funded according to them. They get funding according to their state and whoever's sitting in the seat of governor. And that all, as we know, could become very political at the same time. And then lastly, we want to do a lot of education this year. As we know, it's midterms. So after a certain point, our federal work will kind of teeter off as everybody trying to get reelected. And so we want to do a lot of a good piece of education this year, working with communities across the country to elevate the gun violence in their communities, how we can support them and those type of things, and build out the work there and bring in new folks to Amnesty that are doing this work and want to look at human rights in totality and how we can build on the work that they've already did, the work that you've already done, and looking at the gun violence as well. So I'll stop there and most definitely get into questions. I think there's one in the chat, but if there are questions, just fire away.
Hey, Ernest, there's a couple of questions in the chat.
Going back, yeah.
Yeah, the first one is from Luisa. What countries produce the largest number of firearms?
I believe the U.S. is still the leader in the production of firearms. Yeah, and you know, one fact that was interesting that I found out, like I believe it's Australia. I believe it was Australia. The gun manufacturer Glock like Glock 9mm, that kind of thing. This is crazy. I learned all these guns. It's so wild. The Glock manufacturer, I believe, is housed out of or headquartered out of Australia. They're not able to sell the guns that they manufacture in the home country that they manufacture them in. So all of their guns are sold outside of Australia because of the laws in Australia. And so that was just, fun fact for that was very interesting to me that you're in your home country, you make a product that you can't sell in your home country, but you continue to flourish every year.
Just to dovetail on that question, also just looking at the media, and they talk about these attachments that people are adding to guns that make them rapid fire, super horrible firearms. That whole thing too is sort of picked it up a level when you see people being able to turn their handguns into something really, really threatening.
Yeah, and not only that piece, thank you for that, but not only that piece, but you also another piece, because the piece of legislation here in Illinois we want to address. As I stated, so much going on. Zeke, my manager, you may know Zeke. He tried to keep me on focus, but there's so much stuff going on. But ghost guns, you may have heard the title Ghost Guns. And now Ghost Guns is where you can go online, the great internet, and get the recipe, basically, of how to build a gun, or to get the parts on how to build a gun. And it's built in your house, in your basement, in the garage, but there's no serial number, there's no tracking of the gun. And so this gun is created, built, and so now individuals have a gun in the streets of the US. But it's no way to track it right now. There's no serial number. They don't have to report it, etc. And so ghost guns, as well, in that same vein of the attachments, the bump stocks, and that kind of thing that they are adding to smaller guns to turn them right into automatics, rapid fire, etc. Why has the U.S. not signed the Arms Trade Treaty? Wasn't there an opportunity during? It was. You're correct. It was an opportunity under both. I believe Obama most definitely. I don't know if it's Clinton, but I know Obama. But I don't. The Senate has to ratify it, and he did not have the Senate control. And so the Senate, controlled by the Republicans, was not going to sign off on any kind of international law that the U.S. is now going to have to abide by. We better than that. No. So they wouldn't sign off on it.
One thing here in Texas that's advertised quite a bit, and a different site you look online about guns. Texas no longer has a permit required for open carry, for purchase, or for no registration requirements. No restrictions on open carry, no background checks on private gun sales, and no restrictions on magazine size. So we've kind of gone to the max in the wrong direction here.
Yeah, most definitely. That's yeah. And I don't get, again, I don't get how people see that as okay. I mean, in many other states. I mean, I take a quick story. My cousin, my family is from Mississippi, and so I went down, I don't know, a few years ago when I first started doing this, and my cousin had bought an old, I think like a 75, 76 Corvette, had it redone. So it's pretty, right? Nice T-tops, the whole retro Corvette thing. And so, I was, I need the key, man. Give me the key. I gotta go for a ride. So he give me the key. I go to get in the car, and his pistol is laying on the floor, on the floorboard. I was like, yo, hey, man, what you doing? And he was like, these little young cats, trying to get the cars. They still, doing the carjacking and all of that. I'm like, okay, I'm like, but y'all don't have to have it concealed. You don't have to have it. He was like, no. And same thing as Texas and Mississippi, you don't have to, long as it's visible, the police will not bother you. Like if you're in your car, there's no permit you have to get. There's no test, no training, no background check, the same thing. And so and that really just put it in perspective for me that, yeah, I mean, and my cousin, you know, law-abiding worker every day, but you just think of the folks that don't, and then it doesn't have to be, you know, locked up or secured or anything. So what if a kid, a toddler, or what have you, think it's a toy, and they have access to a gun just laying around, kind of thing. So yeah, so no, it's it's an interesting thing, and so many states are trying to go that route in regards to firearms also.
There was a report back in I think the 80s or 90s that if we stopped making firearms, or military weapons and all, that we would have a depression, because it is that much, that's how important to the economy weapons are.
Oh wow.
And if you look at our military, military is well over almost $1 trillion or more.
Yeah,
and we're not the only one. So
yeah,
it's yeah.
No, that's true. That's an interesting point there, that we go into depression. And then as we see, you know, even now, whatever's going on with Russia and Ukraine, and that's just going to hype up folks, of even just civilians, of wanting guns and thinking, you know, oh, we about to have a war, we got to protect ourselves and all this kind of stuff. So yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, let me ask you, does Amnesty, hey, Bert, go ahead. Go ahead, Bert.
I was curious when you were talking about the licenses for cars. I think I've heard the gun lobby respond that guns are protected by the Constitution, and driving a car is not.
Yeah. But yeah, and it does say that you are able to carry a firearm, but then there's laws, to fight against the law to register the gun. We're not saying that you can't carry it or you can't own it. We're just saying if you are, then it should be some process behind you getting a gun, because we need to know who has it, I think.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that gun lobby just always comes up with, well, my right to carry a firearm is protected by the Constitution.
Right. Yeah. No. Totally.
Maybe it should be a firearm from 1776.
Right.
It should,
A musket.
by the way, thank you for the work you. And I'm curious also about gun restriction is such a difficult battle to get anything passed. And I'm glad to hear you talked about some successes that you've had, or that we have had. But how do you keep your morale up against such a strong gun lobby?
Yeah. Good question. I wonder that every day, actually. I don't know. I mean, I think unfortunately, when you consistently hear the story, something happens in some city. You may get, unfortunately, some school shooting or something that just kind of reinvigorates, to want to go out and keep the fight going. Because it does get, to have the conversation with folks. So you go to state capitals or to DC, and characters would only want to have a conversation with you about it or don't get it. It does get frustrating. And you're just like, I don't understand how you don't understand what I'm saying. But I think those, unfortunately, we haven't, seen situations, where young people, like here in Chicago, I think about 3 weeks ago now, this little young girl, she was like 8 years old, was shot and killed with her mom. She was walking down the street. some guys came down shooting out the window, and it, as always, hit the wrong person from what they were shooting at. And she passed away. And so then come to find out it was another 16-year-old and a 22-year-old that was in the car. But those situations kind of helped me continue on and keep pushing.
We've had quite a few of those in Houston recently, about 5 deaths per week this year so far.
Oh, wow, really? And see, that's what I want to do. It says so much. I really want to elevate the Southern story of gun violence this year somehow, because Chicago's, the St. Louis's, the DC, the Detroits always get the media attention about the gun violence. But Houston, Jackson, Mississippi, I was visiting my family for the holiday, and just like every day, somebody was getting shot down there. You know, in December, a pregnant woman got shot. Before I left in January, another pregnant woman was shot and killed in Jackson. Within less than a 30-day period, 2 pregnant women were shot and killed. But that never hits national news, right? Atlanta, Birmingham, Alabama, etc. So I really want to see how do we, in Houston, you know, how do we elevate the crisis that's happening in our southern cities as well somehow. So yeah, so if you got any ideas, let me know.
Our police have been shot, and the domestic violence is higher,
Wow, yeah.
but and it usually involves guns, and sometimes it's a family and then a suicide.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty high right now.
So to ask, to change the topic a little bit, besides the Safe Gun Act that might or might not pass, what other legislation at the federal level is being considered? Do you know the answer to that?
It's a few that have been introduced. So we have the funding piece to break the cycle of violence act. We have the Ethan's law for the security piece, or the storage piece, safe storage. There is an ERPO law, the Emergency Restraint Protective Order around domestic violence, that's been introduced by, I believe it was Congresswoman McBath she's out of Georgia, I believe she's in. She introduced that. There is always a background check bill that's been introduced, and it sits. It doesn't get a hearing. And so one more that's out there. So those three.
For a while there was assault weapons.
There we go. Yes,
ban.
the assault weapons ban. Yeah,
and that seems pretty reasonable. At one time, it seemed like we had some bipartisan support on that, but
yeah.
The gun lobby saying, well, too many hunters want assault rifles.
Right. You need the AK-47 to shoot a deer, or a rabbit, right? So, but yeah, the assault weapons are typically the ones that's, you know, the assault weapons. The background checks are reintroduced every session, but then the Ethan's law, the break the cycle around the funding, and then the ERPO are newer pieces of legislation. But those 4 or 5 are sitting there in DC right now. So if they wanted to do anything, they could do something.
So do you have enough background to talk about the gun lobby, and in particular after the last election, there was a lot of talk that the NRA would no longer be an effective organization, and but that doesn't seem to have happened.
Yeah, I don't have enough background. I do know that they were in some internal turmoil. The state of New York was dealing with their tax exempt status, their C3 status, and challenging some of the executive team members, and the spending that they were doing. I don't know where that landed in regards to individuals having to resign and them losing their C3 status or not. But but as far as I know, yeah, they're still functioning to some sort of fashion. They may not be as strong, but when you got some of their old time members, still connected with some of our old time congressional members, then that friendship, that stronghold is still there. So they, I think they still have a huge influence on what happens, and not only federally, but even in some of our states as well.
I was just going to add that
Mhm.
locally, most of you are probably aware that Mayor Turner has just allocated, I think, like $44 million for a key or improve the safety of Houston. And he announced that on just a few days ago. And I think he's hoping to partner with local community organizations just to try to address all the things that are causing this really crisis in Houston. I think it
Wow.
involves, like, trying to level abandoned buildings and more police on the patrolling. And I think there's a big element there about gun safety and gun purchase and stuff, but that's been pretty recent. So it'll be interesting to see what that program or how that money is allocated to do,
Yeah.
more detailed and specific things here in our city.
Yeah, most definitely. And a lot of cities, or many cities, used a lot of the ARP dollars, the American Rescue Plan money, that was allocated to cities, states, and counties.
Yeah.
Many of them have tried to allocate, like you were just stating, to deal with some of this violence in their communities as well. But it's just making sure it get to the right organizations and not, many times some huge nonprofit that really is not, they're gonna hire a bunch of other staff, but not really get on the ground and deal with the work and the cause of this violence in communities also. Because it's later, Yeah.
Hey,
I have,
Ernest.
I have a comment or
Yes, sir.
question.
Yes.
Can there
Yeah,
be
go
community awareness, education quarterly, maybe semi-annually at the town hall meeting to educate folks on gun safety, and then conversation can start on different levels?
Yes, most definitely. I like that. I mean, yeah, we could try to pull something together like that, and working with organizations there in the community as well for the audience, and so we can make sure it gets out community. But no, I think that's a great idea to do some consistent updates and educating of what's out there, what's going on around gun violence.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Ernest, I have one question,
Mhm.
just maybe the last question. What can our membership do to help your end gun violence campaign?
Good question. So I mean, locally, just a couple things. I mean, always as getting educated about what's going on. So tonight, most definitely, and then continue on as the work. We're hoping to do some things in Texas in regards to legislature, supporting that work. And then the federal piece of where we have asking federally, and then spreading that information. Not keeping it just within, the 12, 13 people here, but spreading it out across to other organizations, and then connecting with groups there in Houston that are doing gun violence prevention work, and we can look and see where within our networks of partners who have affiliates or folks there in Houston that we can connect you with to support. Many of them are doing events, activities that they need people power, or they need some additional funding, or they need just support, that kind of thing, and just being that additional partner with those organizations there on the ground that's addressing the gun violence, and being that being additional voices. As we all know, elected officials here, and they know if they see the traditional gun violence person coming to talk to them, they know what they're going to talk about. But if they all of a sudden see an Amnesty member, they have no clue. And then you come at them with, hey, gun violence is an issue within the community. And then, hey, my friend, Johnny Joe from the local group, I'm here with them, kind of thing. So So just adding that additional voice locally, I think would be great. But as always, pushing the campaign stuff. We have some online petitions that are, if you go to heroes.amnestyusa.org, heroes.amnestyusa.org. You can find our current online petitions. We have online, we have a call. You can actually do a call in, put in your information, the phone will call you and connect you directly with your legislators there in DC. And so, yeah, so spreading that information to folks across, within your networks as well would be great.
I think that I can't be the only one but here in Texas, I have written letters, I have called the senators and others, and it's kind of hard to feel optimistic when they won't even address your concerns, when they won't answer your letters, your emails, nor return your phone calls or anything else. So, to me, here in Texas, it's really an uphill fight. I mean, it really is. I mean, I applaud everything you're doing, but and not only that, but in the halls of Congress, it's going to take 60 votes. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to happen. And we've been fighting this for a long time, but it seems like instead of getting better, it's getting worse.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I totally agree. But I think that's so I come as the cheerleader to give you the cheer to, hey, we could do it. I mean, I think if we connect with additional people there in Texas and break down the silos where it doesn't feel that you're alone in doing this and reaching out, that we can make some change in that, because it ties all with everything. Again, we're C3, so we don't do the electoral process, but it ties into other issues, gun violence in the domestic violence arena, connecting with those individuals and workers in that arena. It deals with suicide. And so if we come together as a collective, I think that helps to make that difference and push and force those elected officials, even if they're not going to vote for us, at least going to force them that if they see that there's a contingency of folks, in their district from all of these walks of life that's saying the same thing, they at least got to listen. Getting them to vote, that's another fight we got to do sometimes.
I don't remember the statistic exactly, but isn't it something like 7% of the American population is in favor of some gun restrictions?
Yes, I think it's 80. Is it 89, 90% Americans are in favor of background checks. And so it's a overwhelming percentage of Americans that are in favor of background checks. But yeah, they still won't vote. But out of that high percentage, how many folks are consistently holding their elected official 2 feet to the fire on that issue as well? So because
that make more.
I lost it.
Bert, you're muted.
So the American people are in favor of some gun restrictions, common sense gun restrictions, like the easy law and so forth. So the enemy really is the politicians that won't buck the NRA and the NRA lobby in general, right?
Yeah, true. No, I think in general, and I think we've had, and as well, there's a group as well that's out there. Gonna mess their name up. It's like gun owners for common sense gun laws or something like that. But it's all gun owners aren't just saying, hey, let me have all my guns and let me do what I want to do. So it's a lot of there's an organization, a contingency of even gun owners that understand the importance of all of these pieces that the gun violence prevention community is pushing for as well. So
I suspect the majority of gun owners are very responsible and in favor of common law.
Right. No, true. Totally.
Okay, guys. All right, so we are at 7:28. There's a couple comments that Sam Alex has made in the chat box regarding what's going on here in Texas. Most of the gun violence victims are in poor, economically depressed communities,
Hmm.
and that's one reason why things don't tend to change, because it's not a high priority item.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. And that we can see that across states as well.
Yeah.
And that's why and this last thing I said, I know we got to move on to me, but that's why I wanted to make sure as part of the work that we do is that we are elevating those stories, elevating those communities, because they don't get, outside when it's except when it's something huge, then the news media come in there. But to actually talk about the reasons why, elevating the organizations that's doing work that has stopped gun violence. These hospital intervention programs are huge in these communities that go in and help defuse situations. So how do we elevate those stories, let people know that things are happening, and then provide that funding for them that they can keep going? Because without them, a lot of these communities will be worse off than they are now.
We have some pretty strong groups here in Houston associated with the Moms Against Guns and Mothers Against the Violence.
Yeah.
But the Moms Against Guns has been pretty strong. I haven't heard anything lately, but occasionally they'll have something in the paper about meetings or about advocating for various issues, laws.
Yeah. So, and we will hopefully, with COVID life switch up, we'll get back outside as an organization, do some things. I do know June is Gun Violence Awareness Month. And so look forward to information around June. Moms Demand, every town is a huge, and we as Amnesty is a huge partner in putting on the Gun Violence Prevention Month, particularly Wear Orange, which is usually that first Friday of June, where we celebrate individuals that have lost their lives and survivors, etc. So, but June most definitely is Gun Violence Awareness Month. So look for connecting with local orgs, just doing some stuff during that time as well.
All right, Ernest, thank you. Thank you so much for taking time. I mean, this is pretty late out there. So thank you very much on behalf of our membership. And stay on. Who knows? You may get lucky. So Bob, you want to do your drawing?
Oh, you're talking about the book. Oh, okay.
And then it was Hey Bob. And I'm like,
all right, draw.
okay. All right. It is.
I don't know. I got to get my glasses. I can't read my own writing. So, all right. Eve Wider. She's not here, I don't think.
No, she's not. So
all right, we'll go for another one. There we are.
Yeah, mix it.
Okay. We know
Sam Alex.
All right.
All right.
There you go.
Oh wow. Thank you. What did I receive, Bob?
You got yourself a $10 gift card.
Awesome. That means Kayla's gonna take 8 of those 10.
Well, gosh, if I'd known that, I'd have cheated.
Well, I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
Yes. See, that gets you to come back next month.
That's right.
Oh yeah.
Win again.
That's right. Thank you. I'm honored. Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm glad you tuned in.
So Sam, I'll give you a call tomorrow. I'll give you the details. It's a gift card from Brazos Bookstore.
Oh, love it. I need it. It's time for a new book. I think I just completed. We have my pastor Ron Hint. He has a daily devotional, so I'm on the finishing that up and another couple of books as well. So it's time for a new book.
Okay.
And
Great topic tonight, by the way. Very, very interesting conversation. I love everyone's point about maybe what we can do as a community to be more active. So I think we can do it as a grassroots. I think we can really make a difference with gun
yeah,
violence.
yeah.
Okay.
By the way, for those of you who don't know Sam, Sam is is extremely active here in this area. He and along with his wife Kayla are co-founders of this awesome organization called CHAMP. It's Changing Hearts and Minds program that helps veterans and has been doing a wonderful job all over this area. So thank you, Sam.
Thank you for the plug, Muhammad. Thank you so much. It's a labor of love, y'all.
And
right,
Sam
folks.
is also a leader of one of our really strong Democratic clubs here in the area, Bay Area Democratic Movement, and we appreciate his leadership there in that area.
Thanks,
And,
Don.
and I just want to, say hi to our guest. Well, Jennifer comes to our meeting, but she lives in Dallas area, right? Jennifer, in the Dallas Fort Worth area.
Yes, and what we had recently, the virtual Amnesty's virtual meeting that was very recent. And Ernest, I thought you mentioned that there was going to be a billboard in Dallas by Amnesty, but I wasn't able to find out any information on that. Do you know if that's still happening?
Yeah, we did. They're called wheat posters. And so, like you buy a construction site or a boarded up site, and it'd be these like movie posters. So we did those, but they're probably down by now. They was done in, I think, November-ish.
Yeah, I know. And it was too late for me to see. And one of them's like in my neighborhood. I'm in one of the 6 locations or however many.
Gotcha.
So I was a little disappointed about that, but I thought, well, I know he said billboard, so there must be one coming, but so I totally misunderstood, but thank you for doing work in the community.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so thank you all. Our next meeting will be on March 7th, same time. And we're working hard to bring you a really good speaker, just like what we did today. And tell your friends, invite them, and we could use more attendance, right? So thank you all, and have a good week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, take care, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.